Okay, so the first thing is let's look at what we're going to cover today. So there are 7 elements to a successful exit. The very first thing is working out what your end in mind is going to be. The second thing we're going to look at is why it's important to keep your pedal to the metal. The third is the importance of understanding wider horizons. And the fourth, for anybody who's been watching the TV series, is all about succession, though not the TV series, but the importance of that to your business. The fifth bit we're going to look at is the importance of getting people and processes right as part of your exit. And the sixth is the importance of communications and continuity planning. And the seventh is the bit that people forget about. So the last thing we're going to talk about today is that it's not just the money that's important. So if we look at starting with the end in mind, this is when you need to think about what your exit is going to look like. You have really 4 route options for it. The first is stepping up. The second is stepping aside. The third is stepping away. And the fourth is stepping out. Now, I'm going to explain what these mean in a couple of minutes. But the other thing that is really important when you're thinking about the end in mind is identifying your optimal timeline for your exit, because how you exit is going to determine when you exit. And the other thing that it is important to talk about and to think about is, if you are going to sell your business, what's the valuation you have in mind, and is that realistic? I would like you to remember, though, do not underestimate the time it will take you to set you up for success. So let's look at these routes that you have. The first is stepping up. This is when you know you don't want to be doing the day-to-day stuff anymore. You're sick of running the business, but actually you don't want to abandon it completely. What it means is that you will transition to a more strategic, less operational guiding role. You'll become president of the company or chair of the board. Stepping aside, again, you don't want to sell the business, but you also don't see yourself stepping up into a board advisory role or a board management role. Stepping aside happens most in family-owned and run businesses, because what it means is handing over the reins to the next generation of leaders. Your financial return, however, is going to be lower. When you step away from the business, this is the biggie. You don't want to stay on. There's no obvious internal successor. You are ready for the next stage in your journey, and you want to go. What this actually means is you're going to sell your business, and it will either be a management buyout or it will be an external sale. The big thing that you need to think about when you're doing this is, who can you trust with your business baby? Because it is your baby. You've put your heart, your life, your soul into building what you now have. And it's as important to you as your family is. The final exit route is stepping out. And there should never be any shame to this. It tends to happen most in knowledge-based businesses. And it can happen for a number of reasons. The market has changed. You've come to the end of your tether. You're deciding you might want to slow down. There's no real driver for growth within your sector anymore. You have few physical assets, and it's just time for you to move on. And what this means is that you will either wind up or liquidate your business. And as I say, there is never any shame attached to this. Plenty of people have to do it. I've done it myself. It just means that you need to think about what your legacy is going to be and how you protect the intellectual capital that you've built up over the years. So let's talk a bit about timing. Timing is everything. So how much time will you need? Well, if you're planning to step away from the business and sell it, realistically, it's 3 years. And I can hear people saying, oh my God, that's such a long time. It's not. There is so much that you are going to have to do to put in place for that to happen. It really is a 3-year run-up. If you're stepping aside and you're going to do either a management buyout or transition to a family member, you can do this in 18 months. You'd be pushing it a bit, but it is possible to do it. If you're going to step up, you can do that in about a year. It's just about preparing the ground to make sure that the transition happens smoothly. And if you're stepping out, well, 3 months is the minimum. And in the UK, 3 months is the legal minimum to set your business up to close it down and exit it. If it's more complex, if there are debts, if there are other things in it, you could be talking 6 months to a year. So the next element to your successful exit is keeping your pedal to the metal. This, despite the fact that you're wanting to leave, this is absolutely the worst time for you to take your eye off the business ball, particularly if you're going to sell. Because the person or people who buy your business are going to be looking for consistent growth over the period of the negotiations. They're also going to want confidence that you have clear strategies as to how this is going to be delivered. And it is absolutely true that the amount of money you get for selling your business directly correlates to how well you have planned the sale and the amount of time and effort you put in to getting things right at this stage. And that effort does not stop until the day you walk out of the door. Think the deal is in the bag and you can ease off? I'm going to tell you a very salutary tale, and this is a true story from a friend of mine who's a wealth manager here in the UK. One of his clients, in fact, 2 of his clients, because it was a partnership, were looking to sell their business and retire. And it was a really good business, and they had a lot of interest in it. And they started the negotiation dance with a potential purchaser. And everything was going swimmingly, or so they thought, until the final year's accounts came out, which was about 3 months before they were due to complete. And what those accounts showed was that the business had flatlined for 18 months. There was no growth at all. That completely changed the buyer's perceptions, because they started worrying about the market and they started worrying about, what am I doing the right thing here? And they came back with a revised valuation, which was multiple millions less than the price that everybody thought had been agreed. Ultimately, the deal fell through, and the 2 people who were trying to sell their business are now back in the grind again, because they're going to have to build their business up and maintain that level of growth before they can put it back on the market. That's been a hard lesson for them to learn, as well as a very expensive one. It's going to cost them another 2 or 3 years of their lives, and it costs them multiple millions that they could have had access to if they'd done the right thing. The third thing we need to talk about is wider horizons. This is a really important element. And the reason is, certainly the latest information from the States is that over 70% of small business owners who exit regret their decision. And let's just clarify, when we're talking about small businesses, we're talking about up to 250 members of staff and up to a 50 million turnover. That, for a lot of people, is not necessarily a small business. Why? Why do they regret this? Well, actually, these surveys, and these have been going on for a couple of years from the Institute of Exit Planners, indicate the regret is because the owners haven't thought about what happens next, what their off-ramp is actually going to look like. And that's not just in terms of how they're going to step away from their business, but what they're going to do next. What are they actually going to do with their time? Because being ready to retire is not the same as being prepared to retire. And the other thing that they struggle with is that it's not just about you. Because what happens next is not a solo decision. Unless you are single with no children, no partner, and no family, the decision you take about when you go, how you go, and what happens next is one that you have to take with the people who are nearest and dearest to you. I have sat in more than one boardroom because I like to bring certainly spouses and partners into the room when we're talking about what happens next, when we talk about off-ramping with my clients. And I've sat in more than one boardroom where this has come almost as a bolt out of the blue to the person who's not the business owner. And you can quite often see the look of horror pass across their face when they suddenly realize that this person who has had so much energy, so much passion, and has spent so much time involved in the business is now going to be at a loose end and potentially getting under their feet. And that's when you have to have the discussion about where they go next. The options are many. So is it going to be true retirement? Are they going to buy a new house somewhere in the country and spend a lot of time with their family and traveling and doing all the things that they couldn't do when they were running the business? Are they going to have continued board involvement, either in their own business or in somebody else's business? Are they going to make so much money that philanthropy becomes an option? I have a client just now who, when they exit, they're in the process of setting up a trust because they have set themselves a target of educating 100 girls from developing countries to whatever level of education they want as part of their exit strategy, which is brilliant. I'm all in favor of that. Are they going to take some of the cash and become an angel investor? Or is this the end of one journey and the start of another in terms of a new venture? Each of these options require serious planning. And it's not just what to do with your time. Your exit has massive implications in terms of the management of your personal estate, wills and trusts. I genuinely have a client that, when we got onto this bit, said, I don't have a will. They're CEO of a multi-million business, which they founded and they owned, and there is no will about what happens if they fall under a bus. Well, there is now, because I kicked him very hard. You need to talk about property and wealth management. What's going to happen to all the assets that you have? And you need to plan what's going to happen with your health and how that's going to be managed as you progress through the next stage of your life journey. Now, here's the really grindy bit, which is succession. And it's the bit that so many owners do not want to think about, even though they want to go, because it is possibly the most difficult decision that they will make, and one with the greatest potential to mess things up. Get it wrong, and you've got hurt feelings, you've got resentment, you've got jealousy. You may have resignations of key team members. And if you really get it wrong, you'll see internal sabotage in the run up to the deal, and your buyer will find it after the deal within the company because you've not got this piece right. The chosen exit route that you have is going to be your biggest influencer, and you need to create your succession plan accordingly. Each option has unique challenges. So let's quickly look at these. If you're stepping up, so that's you going up into a board role, no longer being involved in the day-to-day stuff. The person who replaces you, are they going to be an internal promotion or an external hire? Are they going to shadow you in your current CEO role first before you move away? If they're an external hire, how are you going to define whether they're a good fit for the business? If they're an internal hire, have you actually asked them if they want to step into that role? Seen more than one business where that was an assumption and a conversation was never had, which ended up in a bit of a sticky situation when it came close to the exit. And here's a really important one. What training and support do they need to make that transition smooth? It's a scary thing when you step up into a CEO role for the first time. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. It's terrifying. There's no manual. So your role when you as you step up is to ease that transition, to create the elements of success. And there's an important one. Are you going to offer them, as part of the deal, equity in the business? And if so, what are the conditions that you're going to put on that? And when we talked about jealousy and resentment and hurt feelings, how are you going to manage the expectations of all the people that you haven't selected? If you're stepping aside, is it going to be for an anointed successor who's already working within your organization, or is it going to be for a family member? Are they ready for it? How will others in the business feel about the call that you make? How are you going to manage their potential disappointment and, quite frankly, if it's a family member, their fears? A big one to consider if you're thinking about stepping aside from your business: can you really let go of the day-to-day involvement? I mean, really let go. This is not just about delegation. This is about saying, I'm stepping aside. I'm not stepping up. It's up to you to carry the torch now. Are you content to bite your tongue and not interfere? Because by stepping aside rather than stepping up, that's the public perception that you have created for everybody else. If you're going to step away, so exiting the business, you need to understand your buyer and the succession piece that the buyer will be looking for. When you're having conversations with them, you need to understand how much change are they planning to bring to the organization. Do you understand which of there are 11 reasons why somebody will buy your business? Do you understand which of those reasons are the driver behind their decision to buy you? And how is that going to affect the people that you have working with you? Are they likely to import a new top team? We've all seen businesses where the purchase happens and the new buyers already have in mind who they want to run that business. And if they do bring in a new top team, how's that going to affect your existing people? How are you going to manage the expectations on both sides as to what happens next? And here's a really important one. Are you inadvertently part of the transaction? And that will depend on where you are and what seat you sit in when the negotiations start. For an awful lot of business owners, they will need to step up first before they can step away. Because if they don't step up into the chair role, they will become part of the deal. And a big thing that your buyers are going to want to know is, are the key executives locked in for the duration of the sale and beyond? If you're stepping out, this is the nuclear option. It really is, in terms of, there is no succession planning because you're going. It's the end of an era for you and for your team. You, as the owner, have a moral bounden duty to do the right thing. The right thing for your team. That means notice periods. It means consultations. It means going through the redundancy process correctly. But it also means being kind, because you've got a lot of very scared people who are now not only uncertain about their future, they have no future with you. Help them understand what their options are and give them as much support as they need to transition into the next stage of their lives, whether they're retiring or whether they're moving on to another organization. Your role is to help them find the best future fit for them. Element 5 in a successful exit is people and processes. So is the business in the best possible shape for this transition? What will its structure look like when you go? Do you have a 3-year plan for growth? Do you have clear learning and development objectives for everybody within the organization, which will help support not only the growth plan, but also the transition plan? Processes and procedures. My goodness, the number of small businesses and even medium-sized businesses that don't have these documented is frightening. When you're thinking about exiting, in the run-up to the exit, now is the time to clarify what you do and how you do it and document that. You want to have a "this is what and how we do things" manual, like a big book that anybody can take off the shelf and go, that's how we do things around here. But it needs to be real, not aspirational. And as you're looking at all the things that you do and how you do it, that's when you need to identify what it is you need to do and what you need to change within the organization to make it smoother. 6th, the penultimate element, is comms and continuity. This is a time of significant uncertainty and fears. And guess what? It's on you to manage everybody's expectations. Communication planning is absolutely key to this. And when you're doing marketing, this is a key part of your marketing message, is how you're going to manage the transition. Who do you tell? Well, everybody. This is not something you should be keeping secret. When do you tell them? You tell them as early as you need to tell them so that they can make their plans accordingly. This is not something you should ever drop on anybody at the last minute. So it doesn't matter whether it's your board, it doesn't matter whether it's your senior leadership team or the rest of your employees or stakeholders, your investors, your bank, your advisors, your clients, your suppliers. They all need to know as early as possible so you can reassure them that things will go on pretty much as they can with a clear plan. How do you tell them? For as many people as possible, it's face-to-face, or pick up a phone, or arrange a Zoom call. Don't do it by email. You've got to do that reassurance as a person, not as a corporation. You need to communicate early, you need to communicate often, because now is the time where you need to build in transparency and trust. I had a client who was exiting their business and didn't want anybody to know that they were exiting their business, to the extent where we couldn't even mention the E word in any communications between us in case PAs found out. And one of the things that I had to do is change the mindset on that to say, they were concerned that if people knew they were going to exit, they would lose their staff. And I said, you might do, but that's unusual. It's far more likely you will lose key members of staff because you didn't keep them informed and engaged, because they will go, well, I've worked for them for years and they didn't trust me with this information and with what I would do with it. So trust is really important and transparency is really important. And for a transition to be successful, you need to have clarity over what continuity looks like. What is this place going to look like? What's this business going to look like when I'm gone? Now, the final element to a successful exit is the cash, except it's not. It's actually not just about the money. And for some owners, it's not even about the money, because this is your business, baby. And don't underestimate the emotional friction that there will be as you get closer to your leaving. It's a very, very emotional time. So there are other important elements you need to consider. When you're looking for a buyer, when you're looking at doing a transition, when you're looking at a successor, how are you going to honor your legacy? And how are they going to honor your legacy and all the stuff that you've put into building up the business to where it is now? Are the values and ethos of your successor in line with yours? If you're selling your business and it's going to be as part of a merger or an acquisition by a bigger business, how are the two cultures going to fit? Are there sufficient overlaps and similarities that this is going to be easy all round? Because if it isn't, you might want to, if the culture fit isn't right, you might want to rethink who you're selling it to. And how are you going to protect your team? Because they will all be terrified that the next person who sits in your seat, if you have sold the business, is going to sack them. They're going to asset strip the business and everybody will lose their jobs. It's never too early to start planning. So do we have any questions? Kirsten, have you got any questions on that, from that?
Do you have a starting point, like all these things that need to happen over the 1 year or the 3 year period? Is there any one of them that stands out as a better starting point?
The very first one is the end in mind. So it's working out how you want to go and when you want to go, and having a rough idea of what that means for you in terms of finances and valuation. And particularly if you're going to sell your business, you need to understand how much the business is valued at now. And what you need to do, and there's a big piece about marketing in here and sales in here, what you need to do to get it to the valuation that you would like when you exit.
That's great. So are you doing concurrently, like, let's say, are you doing SOPs and your marketing plan and all of those things? You're trying to do that concurrently?
When when I go through this with my clients, we go through it over a 10-month period. And each month we look at a different element and what that means for the business. So they have a whole month where we just focus on what it's going to look like in terms of growth. We just have a whole month where we're talking about succession planning. We have a whole month when we talk about, so the journey that you take covers all of those 7 elements, but it does it in the order that I've learned over the years they need to follow to make this as easy as possible.
Gotcha.
Right. So the program that I run is called Exit Optimized. And you're seeing for the first time our brand new Growth Circles logo, which is my new venture, well, newish venture. And so if you want to explore your options, or if you want to talk to me about clients that you have that are going through this exit process, there's my contact details, and I would love to take your calls.